Well, good Shabbos and welcome again. We're going to, we prayed for our service during our time of prayer, so we'll jump into it. Tuesday, we talked about different stages and different numbers in the genealogies. And we learned that within those things that we have to maintain a means of continuing to be filled with the truth, power, and the ability of Elohim, and that the only way really to stay filled is to stay in the Word, to communicate with our Elohim, and to take time to praise our Elohim. Now, our Torah portion tonight is Ve'etza, which means and went. And it talks about Jacob's leaving Beersheba and going to Haran, and that on the way there he stops at the place, and that it's starting to get evening, so he lays his head down on a rock to sleep through the night. And in the night, the ladder comes down from heaven and touches the earth, and the messengers of Elohim are going up and down the ladder. And then Elohim is standing next to Jacob. So we're going to take kind of a look at this to kind of see how we can apply this to our lives. Now, we say change is part of life. We go through changes. Situations change. Our health changes. All kinds of stuff changes. But the choices that we make in the midst of those changes dictate where we are, where we're going to be when our life comes to an end. We talked about in the genealogies that it said, and all the days of so-and-so were such and such, and then at the end of that it says, and then he died. And we saw within that there's a time frame for certain things to happen. And we've said it several times that building our relationship with Yehovah, our Elohim, through His Word, our restoration, our redemption, our deliverance, Yeshua, by the power and the infilling of the anointing of Yehovah, who is Mashiach, that this happens to us in our lifetime. Once we're dead, there's no need for this. So we have to understand that change happens, but we have to be able to adjust to change. Now, this study illustrates what is to come to a point in life where we allow ourselves to either be parched and dried out, but we also know that we can find our rest in Elohim, and that He will restore us regardless of the state of our dryness. And an illustration that I use, and I've used it with y'all before, is when we look in the story of creation in Genesis, that He separated the water from the dry land. Dry land can't bring forth anything. It has to be watered. And that's when the dry land is able to bring forth fruit, or trees that bring forth fruit and vegetables, and life can exist. Without water, we can't exist. But even at that, we can remain dry, and Elohim can rain down all the rain in the world to where it floods. And if we don't recognize that water, and we don't recognize that there's an ark that we can get into, that we're going to be destroyed in the end as well. So, we look at verse 10 of chapter 28. It says, and Jacob went out from Beersheba and went towards Haran. Now, Jacob means supplanter. It's a representation of those things that hold us back. And we read in that verse that he leaves from Beersheba. This is a word that means, Bera means a well, a spring. Sheba means 7. comes from a root, Shabbat, which means to take an oath, and from another root, Sabah, that means to be satisfied. Now, holding on to that, we consider Shabbat. Tonight is Shabbat, or it's Erev Shabbat. So right now it's Shabbat because the sun's gone down. Why do we celebrate Shabbat? Why do we keep Shabbat? Okay, Elohim said that we should observe Shabbat, we should remember Shabbat. But the purpose of Shabbat is for us to be reminded. Shabbat comes from the word Shiva, meaning 7. Shabbat serves to remind us that we have taken an oath and that we must be satisfied in that oath. We have feasts and festivals. They're all called the Shabbats of Elohim. Why do we call the feasts and festivals Shabbats? I mean, okay, I can see Shavuot being called Shabbat. It's Shavuot, this the 7th. But why do we call all the feasts and festivals Shabbat? Because the feasts and the festivals are to remind us throughout the year that we are to honor our oath to our Elohim, and that we are to be content in our oath. We have the festivals are festive, even Yom Kippur, which we call the Day of Atonement, when we're supposed to humble ourselves and think about where we're at, is a time of joy because we are actually taking the time to reflect on where we're at and where we can improve. So they're Shabbats. They remind us that we have taken an oath to Elohim and that we are going to be satisfied within our oath. What is our oath? We recite, on Friday evenings, we recite the Shema. The Shema is our oath. We're saying, I understand that Elohim prevails. I am going to pay attention to that. I'm going to honor that. I'm going to perceive that, discern that, break that down into the smallest components so that I can apply that to my life. And then it means to what? Shema also means to be content. I'm going to be satisfied in having done this. Now, how many people take the time in the morning when the alarm clock goes off, the first thing we want to say is, oh dear God, not again. Okay? Sometimes. If we're all busy in jobs, we've all got a lot of things going on, first thing we do is we jump out of bed and we're running 1,000,000 miles an hour, trying to figure out how to tie our tie and tie our shoes at the same time and not get them all tangled, and not to put on our bathrobe instead of our suit jacket and run out the door. What would happen? Because we say the Shema at Shabbat to remind us of the oath once a week. We say the Shema during the Feast and Festivals to remind us of our oath 7 times a year. What would happen if instead of getting up in a hurry and in a panic, we got up and the first thing we did was take just a few minutes to say Shema Yisrael, Yehovah Eloheinu, Yehovah Echad, and then sit there and think about it. I've just said Shema. Today, my Elohim, I am going to walk with you. I'm going to understand you. I'm going to apply your word in my life. I'm not going to get freaked out, stressed out, worn out by the things that I come into, because your word and your anointing dwells in me. You've made your oath to me. My oath to you is that I'm going to be content and satisfied in my relationship with you. What would happen if we did that every morning? What would happen if we took 5 minutes at lunch or sometime in the middle of the day when everything's hectic and the cakes aren't rising the way they should, and the lights aren't coming on in 47 stores throughout the United States, and the sheet metal won't bend, and the house is a disaster for the 14th time that you cleaned it because you can't keep the grandkids out of the kitchen. What would happen if you took 5 minutes in the midst of that turmoil and pulled off to the side, locked yourself in the bathroom? That's what I used to do when I was a busboy. Lock yourself in the bathroom and say, Shema Yisrael, Yehovah Eloheinu Yehovah Echad. Elohim, you prevail in my life. I'm committing myself to you. I'm trusting in you for this day. Thank you. I'm going to be content in my walk with you regardless of what happens. We think about things like that because if we don't think about things like that, then we leave from Beersheba and we go to Haran. What does Haran mean? Haran means burned up. It means parched. It means something that is absent of water. We get absent of water. And what happens when we're absent of water? What happens when we don't have the water? What happens when we don't recognize our oath? Then we struggle. And we struggle in something that's called complacency. We get into a comfort zone. Our comfort zone is being stressed until our heads are about to explode. That's our comfort zone. Because I am Pharaoh, and I am going to defend Egypt till the end. I'm not going to let Elohim come over the walls of this city that's under siege and rescue me. Complacency knocks us out. So, questions that we can ask here is what holds you back from taking an oath to Elohim? What keeps you from yoking yourself to him through his word and finding rest and satisfaction in him? You get home. The day's been long. All you want to do is go to sleep. What about if the last thing you say before you go to sleep is Shema Yisrael, Yehovah Eloheinu Yehovah Echad. Elohim, thank you for getting me through this day. Thank you for everything that you've pulled through. I've done what I could to stay in your word. Forgive me for the lapses where I didn't. Bring me rest. I find my joy in you. Okay? What did Jacob leave? He left Isaac. He left Isaac, a word that means laughter and joy. He left Beersheba, the things that means the springs of the oaths. He left the springs of the living water. Then he went to Haran. Now, we say that Haran is to leave the spring of living water to go to a place that means parched. What happened to Jacob in Haran? Well, we see that he spent roughly the next 2 decades struggling to make a living, to take care of his family, working for a crooked boss. The hardships of life and the worries that were associated with life, if we apply this to us, will drain us. Okay? They'll drain us. They will make us parched. And they'll leave us parched if we turn our backs on and allow the struggles in life to hold us back from drinking in the living waters that connect us to Elohim. However, Jacob left Beersheba with something. That before Jacob left Beersheba, Isaac blessed him and said that you will be blessed with the dew from heaven. You will be blessed with the richness of the earth. And you will be blessed with plenty of grain and new wine. We understand that we go into the world. That we leave Beersheba and we go into the world to do what we have to do in order to make that living. And it's a struggle. And it wears us out and it dries us out. But we understand that our joy is our walk with Elohim. And that when we leave that joy, understanding that we are keeping our oath, we leave that joy, understanding that heaven's due, that the spiritual protection that surrounds us goes wherever we go. That Mashiach is within us. Yeshua said, I can do all things through Mashiach that strengthens me, and that greater is that is in me than that is in the world. I leave with heavenly protection. And that if I keep my mind focused on the oath, then everything that I put my hand to will prosper. I have the fatness of the earth. Because I am in a covenant relationship, I have the grain and the new wine in my life that brings me into a very, very intimate relationship with Elohim through His Word, through His anointing. So Jacob, although he got himself into this mess, he kept his relationship with Elohim. He kept that relationship strong and alive. And as a result, he prospered. Elohim told him, do this. He would do it. The goats would come out, the sheep would come out the way that he wanted to. Elohim would say, do this. He would do it. And he would prosper, and he grew more and more, larger and larger.
Right.
Had children. So he still prospered, even in the midst of the turmoil that he went through with Laban. And this is what happens when we stay connected to the source and find our rest in Him, not yielding to the self and drying up. Okay? Now, we go on to verse 11. It says, and he came upon the place. And he tarried there, he stayed there, or he remained there all night, because the sun was set. And he took one of the stones of the place and put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. So, okay, we get a picture that he got to this place and it was getting dark, so he picked up a rock and he put it down and he laid his head down. And he probably hit his head too hard, and this is why he had the dream. The verse begins, and he came upon the place. It doesn't say a place, but in Ba Makom, it means upon the place. The bait here literally means in. He came in the place. Makom is one of the titles of Yehovah Eloheinu, our Elohim. In the phrase, because the sun was set, we are reminded of the first time that we see the ayin as the root of a word in Torah is in the word erev, which means evening. So what is it telling us? That we reside within the house of Elohim. We reside within the place, that He surrounds us. But even though He surrounds us, we still have a responsibility to perceive. What are we perceiving? It says that he perceived that he must stay or remain in Elohim, and it says, and he tarried there all night. The first time that we see lamed as the root of a word in Torah is in the word leila, which means night. The understanding is that if we allow ourselves to be within Elohim, if we allow Elohim to surround us, and we are within the place, that our perception has to be focused on the fact that He does surround us, that He is right there with us, that He will never leave us or forsake us, and that the darkness that we perceive will actually turn to light. Okay? Everybody with me on that? Mm-hmm. So, lamed, first time we see it is in night. So we can take away from this that we must perceive and then make our way into the house of Yehovah in order to receive the instruction that brings us to the light. We can stay connected to Elohim through His light, which will shield us from the darkness. But this seeking must always be part of our perception. Again, our perception? How do we sharpen and